Hello, welcome to this video. And on this video, I'm going to be asking the question, what would happen if we got rid of copyright? With the idea that it might be a nice idea to get rid of copyright. But I thought also, to try and make some of the points I'm about to make, it'd be interesting to get out and about into the beautiful English countryside. So this video will be shot on various locations because when you make a video like this, it's not just what I'm saying and the content that is important. It's also what it looks like and what it sounds like. Somebody might be appreciating the fact that they want to see the lovely blue skies with the fluffy clouds and the open fields, and they might just want to listen to the birds. People who don't live near countryside like this might want to know what it's like to be out in the English countryside. I'm nowhere special at the moment. I've just driven outside my town, parked up, and just walked down a random footpath. I've never come down here before. And what am I doing this for? Because I'm creating a piece of art here. This is my piece of art. It will be owned by me. If somebody was to use elements of this on YouTube, YouTube would notify me and say, someone else has used your video, Andy. And I could get them for it, because once I've created this masterpiece here of video entertainment, once that's done, I own it. I own the copyright on this. But what do I actually own? Well, I would like to say I own what I'm saying, but anybody could write that out, couldn't they? Transcribe it, stick it into AI, get them to rewrite it, and my ideas would still be there perhaps. But do I really own what I'm saying? But of course, the clouds and the field and the birds and the aeroplane are not mine. So how can I own any of this? So what is copyright and how does it work? Well, you create something, and the moment you've created it, you have the rights to it. You own that creative piece of work. If somebody else uses that work in any way to make money, then you should be getting a bit of that money. And there's nothing you have to register. It's not like a patent. You don't have to say that I've done this. As soon as you've created something, you have those rights. So if you ever get into a legal dispute, the dispute will always be about the date in which you created these ideas. Obviously, with a video like this, it's time stamped. If I put it up on YouTube, those dates would be up as well. So I can prove the day and the time that I made this video. And so the unique creativity of this video, I can prove. And so if somebody wanted to steal it and use it in a certain way, they could. Some other YouTuber might see it and they may want to say, well, I'm going to do a video on copyright and I'll start it in an empty field with some fluffy clouds. Of course, it wouldn't be as good as mine, but they could try and copy me. And somebody might see that and go, they've copied that off Andy Edwards. I may have copied this idea off somebody else, who knows? So copyright was created. Once copyright has been proved, right? And with the advent of the internet, the copyright is now wound in. So if I was to put some lovely music underneath this video that was made by, say, Vangelis, and as soon as I put that video up, YouTube would go, oh my God, there's some Vangelis on here, and that's registered. Vangelis owns the copyright of it. And then the next thing that would happen would be that, and I think Vangelis, is he still alive or dead? See, this is where my knowledge is rubbish. I'm pretty sure Vangelis is dead. And why does that matter? Well, I'll tell you why, because it depends where that money is going to go. Because, of course, as soon as I put this video up on YouTube, what would happen is that YouTube would say, you have used some music from Vangelis for 2 minutes. Your video is an hour long, but you've used it for 2 minutes. And so it would then seize all the ad revenue, all the money, everything that was associated with this video would be owned by Vangelis. And he would start to get the money. If he's dead, and I can't quite remember, I feel he is, then some family member might be getting it. And that family member might have died in the interim, and that would have been passed on to somebody else. It's highly likely some bizarre cousin or somebody who's got nothing to do with Vangelis is now receiving that money. And with someone like Vangelis, with things like Chariots of Fire and the theme to Cosmos and all the TV work he has done, that would be a lot of money. There are literally people sat all over the world who have some distant relationship with some famous artist, filmmaker or musician that are receiving significant amounts of money every year for stuff that they had nothing to do with. So as a YouTuber, when I try and do YouTube and I have to jump through I have to try and jump over the hurdles that are provided where I want to talk about music, I want to talk about weird and obscure music. It's highly likely that if somebody hears about a band that I'm talking about and here and likes it, went out and bought their stuff or listened to it or anything, that person would be making money, and yet I am unable to do that. And that seems really ironic in the nature of what I'm trying to do here on YouTube. And of course, you find then that things are they're not set in stone. Certain music used, nothing happens. Sometimes you can not use music. I once used the silent section of Live Aid. It was where Bob Geldof just shouted a couple of words, and that got claimed under the copyright of the song Do They Know It's Christmas. Now that, of course, that money is hopefully going to a good cause, but I thought it was very strange that that was classed as the song. We're going to have a mental experiment on this video where I'm going to imagine what it would be like if we got rid of copyright, what would be the fallout and where we would end up in the end. And I'm going to do it as I walk through the countryside. I do have to say that I brought a special stand out with me today, and so I could walk and talk and make it a different type of video, but the stand has broken. In fact, this bit of plastic has broken off it. And so I can't do that anymore. So I'm going to have to prop up my camera in various places as I walk. Which is no problem, but it's changed the nature of the video. So even the structure and nature of this video is not determined by me, is it? It's determined by the sturdiness of my camera holder, which in this case is not very sturdy at all. If we were to imagine just getting rid of copyright, we get rid of one of the main ways that musicians earn their money. And although I've identified stuff at the beginning of this video which could seem to be immoral, the idea that some video that's an hour long has been grabbed entirely because a short piece of music has been put into it, in which the copyright is then going to people who had nothing to do with the creation of that piece of work, which is basically what's happening all the time, there's an argument that doesn't seem right. But obviously, if we were to take away copyright, someone like me who earns part of their income by the ad revenue that we have on videos like this, I would now not be able to do this anymore. And basically, the music industry would stop at that point. In the old days, musicians could make a living because they sold records. The music industry was actually the recorded music industry. And people got rich because they could make an album and that album would be bought, and they were buying a physical product in which the artist got a percentage of that product. But they also had other ways of making money. If their record was a hit and played on the radio, every time it was played on the radio, because that radio station would be making money by playing their songs, for the duration of that song being played, they would receive money. If that song was used in a film, if that song was used in a TV series, even in the background, even if somebody just walked into a bar and it just happened to be playing on the radio in the background, the artists would get money, and significant amounts of money. When YouTube and the internet was created, YouTube was making its money again through ad revenue. Ad revenue is linked directly to copyright now. And it always has been to a certain extent. When those tracks were played on the radio in the old days, it was the advertisements that paid for the radio to be there, and it was the tracks that helped the radio station to exist so it could put adverts up. Now, the main way of making money if you are a musician is entirely from ad revenue. And every single way that you look at it, you will either be creating something that will be creating ad revenue, or the audience that you've created, which is what basically the advertisers are buying from you, is your audience for a certain amount of time, you can actually monetize directly by making them buy stuff off you or getting them to work on a subscription model. Now, this is what I was thinking about this morning, which promoted me to make this video, is that if we were to ban ad revenue, so we would ban copyright, I could make much better videos because I could put all sorts of stuff on here. I could play tracks, I could do this. Now I could do that now, but I would lose the ad revenue because the other people would be getting the ad revenue, right? And this is a real problem on here when it comes to promoting new bands. I get asked to promote new bands all the time. I get messages, can you do this, can you do that? Now, those videos do not do very well, but I feel morally obliged to help these young bands because I now have a platform and I have a very specific audience, and I can put music that I think that audience would like in front of them. But the problem is if a new band approaches me and they give me their track to push, as soon as I play that track on my video, that video is demonetized. Okay, so this is why I don't do that. The obvious way to promote a band would be embed these tracks inside a video that is really getting a lot more views, you know. So if you were to say do the 10 greatest Genesis albums, for example, and then you had a band that was very similar to Genesis, you could maybe interview them about what their favourite Genesis album is, and then you play a bit of their track, and then certain members of the audience will go, well, I like Genesis, this is why I'm watching the video, and I like that band, I'll go and buy their CD. But the whole of that video would be demonetized. So there is a problem with copyright, and this is what I start to think about. And so this mental idea of what would happen if we scrapped it all together, right? Then we could do all sorts of stuff of bringing an audience in. But YouTube, of course, would collapse unless YouTube owned everything 100%. Now, that would be so totalitarian. I don't think it just wouldn't work, because why would anyone want to make YouTubes? If anything like that was to happen, and it could well happen, what I would have to do is I would then withdraw into my sort of paywall of Patreon and various other things. I would carry on there, and I imagine people who were watching my channel that were enjoying it, a few more that hadn't signed up for Patreon, say, well, if that's the only place to see Andy's videos, I'm going to go there. And so they would jump there. There would be less people watching, but they would be paying actually relatively more, because those who are paying are only paying for it with their eyes watching adverts. That's how they pay for this content. But now they would be paying a small fee to them directly to me. But because the money is 100% now directly coming to me, except for the cut from Patreon, that means that I would be able to, with a much smaller audience, recoup the costs and probably do actually better. Now, there's a problem with this model, because this is what everyone thinks they would do. Well, there's a number of problems. Obviously, if I was to do this, the acquisition of new people would be very difficult. But I could then make very popularist videos on YouTube. Without the copyright, I would be able to put, loads of music up. And there's a lot of YouTubers that work like that, where they have millions and millions of followers, but their ad revenue is not that much, if anything at all, because they have embedded in all sorts of things. But the trouble with that is your videos then become sort of a massive big advert, while people say, go and check out my bundle of whatever it is, or go and buy my mug or t-shirt or whatever it is. And my way of doing stuff, where I sort of improvise to camera, I just want to be able to, I hate the fact that the adverts are there. When I watch one of my videos and the adverts are cutting into sort of my stream of consciousness, whether that be good or bad, is upsetting. People might be appreciating what I'm saying because they think it's nonsense, and they think this guy's just making this up as he goes along, and but yet that enjoyment that they have would be disturbed by the ads. So this is the things that are really concerning me. But there's another thing with subscription that worries me even more. To say I'm a prolific artist would be an understatement. there are two types of artists I've found working in the industry. There are those who are sort of perfectionists, and they work away, you know, like a sculptor at some marble, chipping away tiny chips over years and years until they finally create their masterpiece. They're the sort of artists that are very thoughtful and controlled, and they really believe that their art is a statement of themselves, of their creative genius, which of course is a very difficult thing to believe. So they also are usually suffused with a lot of self-loathing, and so they ponder their art thinking, I'm terrible, this is a waste of time, am I wasting my life? I'm not one of those artists at all. What I am is someone who I get up and I'm creative. And then I go to bed and I get up and I'm creative, and I've been like that my whole life. When I was a little kid, I was really into art, and my mum and dad would have to find huge amounts of pieces of paper because I would literally do 10, 20, 30 drawings a day. The reason is because my brain's very active, and once I start being creative, it latches onto that, and it sort of creates a symbiosis with my brain going at 100 miles an hour, and then my actions are in line. If not, then my brain seems to act like someone pressing down on the accelerator in their car whilst holding the brake at the same time. So my creativity is basically releasing the brake. And so creatively, a subscription model is really good for me because I create a lot of work. Why would someone want to pay a certain amount of money every month to only get a piece of art every 2 years? It's not for me at all. I produce a lot of work. And so here on YouTube, it's perfect because I could make a small amount of money off ad revenue because I do lots and lots of videos that get watched, not huge numbers, but enough numbers for them all to just make a little bit of money. I'm out here working on minimum wage at the moment, if I'm lucky. Right, I'm sat talking to you, and I am making some money in the future off ad revenue, but it's tiny amounts. This video will probably make me about £10, $10, something like that. But I do a lot of videos throughout the week. Sometimes I hit on videos that do a little bit better and they make a little bit more. But I do not make vast amounts of money off one video. I make little amounts off a lot of videos, which actually creates a much safer environment to be working in. Fundamentally, in a utopian state, my job would be to get up in the morning and make music. All right, I talk about music and I love music and I think about music, and I've been able to monetize how much I think about music, which before I'd monetized by becoming a music lecturer and being able to look at criteria in a college and then think about music and line up creative ways of making music with the students that also hit the criteria, which I enjoyed doing very much. But with YouTube, I monetize me thinking about music. But the ideal would be to be able to make music. Now I have a Bandcamp. And on that Bandcamp, I have been putting albums and various pieces of music up for about 10 years now. When I first set it up, it was basically a dumping place for all the albums that I'd made myself. And in the industry, I always had two levels of making music. There was the proper music making, all the proper albums I made with the record companies that were paid for by the record companies, done in proper studios. I've done up to a certain very high quality standard up here. Whereas my own music, I made myself. It was like a sort of cottage industry. I had my own little studio, and the quality was good, and the mixes were good, and I do art, you know, and so I love doing the covers. But I knew that this was a different thing. The quality level wasn't quite so high. I could work much quicker because when you make an album with a record company, it takes about a year, you know, it's such a long-winded process. And so I could make albums very quickly, but what I could do was indulge my creativity completely. And so the albums at my Bandcamp, if you listen to them, are far more avant-garde and far more out there than the music I've made within the industry. All right. A subscription model is good for me because I could probably, I mean, if I wasn't doing YouTube, I could definitely do an album every 2 weeks. No problem. With doing YouTube, I still have to get and make music, because I can't do the YouTube unless I'm creatively making music. I would hate to be somebody talking about music who has lost the ability to actually create music. And believe me, creating music is the fundamental heart of all music. And so, even with YouTube, I could probably make an album every 2 months, if not every month, if I'm really feeling stressed and getting into the studio more and more. Since I've taken on my new studio, it's actually a lot easier to get in there, just sit down and work, because there's more space. It takes a short time to set up stuff. All these logistics and process things are the basic spine of creativity, and I would love to be talking about these things, because it's enabling those things that will enable you to be creative. And if you are tortured with a certain mind that's a bit overactive, then you should be being creative. So with the amount of albums I make on my Bandcamp, I think there's at least 50 as I'm talking now. When you watch this video, it might be like 55 or 60. Who knows how many I'll squeeze out. That's a joke. I'm not quite that prolific. So I have moved my Bandcamp over, which was relatively successful, and I'll explain how it was successful. I have a YouTube, there's an audience there. I talk about a certain type of music, which is quite experimental, quite out there, jazz, proggy, and that's the sort of music I make. Someone who's really intrigued might go and check out the links, and they might go over to my Bandcamp, and then when they arrived at my Bandcamp, they found that there was 50 albums there, all at zero cost. No money. You didn't have to. You could just download them. You could take the whole lot for free. And some people did, but most people would then be in a different type of interaction creatively. They would go, "Oh, I want Andy's album. He hasn't asked for anything for him, but I'll just pop a little bit of money in his upper pocket, just for doing a good job." And that's a different interaction. That's someone giving you a present rather than reimbursing you for the work you've done. And I think that's a much better way of artists making their money. It's much like busking, really. And so with that, my Bandcamp would make a very tiny trickle of money as some people buying those albums and paying for them. And for those of you who've done that, I really appreciate that. Also, my albums would all be available for my patrons. But I'm very aware that there's not many people in the world who actually want to sit down and listen to my albums. If they do sit down and listen to my albums, they're bloody difficult to listen to. Because one of the aesthetic things I'm interested in is picking up the audience and take them to a place which sometimes is a little bit difficult. That's one of the things I love about being not signed to a label. I am very knowledgeable about creating music which brings an audience in. I'm very aware of the commercial aspects of music making, but when I make my own music making, sometimes I like to question that and take the music to a place which becomes, in some cases, intolerable, even to me. And I love exploring the aesthetics of that. So my stuff is much more creative on my own Bandcamp page. So that's how it's been toddling along when I make an album. Now, one of the things that's upset me about this is that when I've made an album, then I have to announce I've made an album in like they did in the old days. It's like, Black Sabbath, they got a new album out. It's coming out in October. Oh, I've been waiting for this for 2 years. And there's going to be an accompanying tour and videos and all this type of stuff. And so there's this big hoopla that's associated with making albums. And I don't like that. I just want the album to appear, right? And I want some people to listen to it. So I thought I'm going to move my Bandcamp over to a subscription model, which I have now done. So basically, if you go to my channel, you can listen to my music because I think there's 4 compilation albums. One covers sort of the main, it's called Sampler, covers the main sort of music I do. There's a funk one, which is got loads of very funky grooves because my stuff's pretty funky. There's a Kundabuffer one, which has got all vocal stuff on it, so that's very commercial. And then I believe there's one which is called Heroes, and it's basically covers of tunes that people who watch my channel be like me covering tracks by Herbie Hancock and John McLaughlin and things like that. And somebody can go there, they can listen to that for free, 3 times stream it, and then after that it will ask for them to pay them. And I have put those back up to the standard Bandcamp price of £7. But all my actual creative albums, all the albums that are lined up and tell a story, that have huge tracks that are an hour long and all this mad stuff that I've done, that is now behind a subscription paywall of £15, which I thought that's the cost of a CD. So for the cost of a CD, you get over 50 albums worth of unlimited downloading, unlimited streaming for a year. By the time you get to that year, once I don't have to worry about the hoopla of making an album. I can just squirt stuff out as I make it, which means I have a much more wider remit of the sort of stuff I can release. There will probably be another 20 or 30 albums. So it might be that people will stay there paying quite a small fee every month, but that can grow exponentially and it might become viable. At that point, if it was to become viable, I would then be starting to think about my Bandcamp becoming a label and starting to put other artists out. And this is what the labels should have done. The labels should have been genre specific. So labels like ECM, Acid Jazz, Warp, they should have really moved over to a subscription model where people got the whole catalogue for a yearly payment. And the subscription model is the thing that would exist if we got rid of copyright. Right, I've just described what I think would happen is everyone would move over to a subscription model. And a subscription model is without doubt the best for a creative artist. Now, the platform that does everything is Patreon. If you're a creative artist of any type, if you're a sculptor or a painter or a filmmaker or whatever it is, musician, you should have a Patreon, and your central drive as a musician in terms of marketing and promotion should be driving people towards your Patreon. Right? Now, one other thing I'm positing on this video, is if we just got rid of copyright, would it create a more level playing field for artists to be able to get it out, and by utilising the music that already exists and promoting that in a certain way, bring like-minded people to your own music? Because that is one of the ways that you market music. It's the marketing of genre. In the old days, you would have a subculture that would be linked to that. So the next thing I want to think about is really what would happen if we got rid of copyright. When you go out and about, there's always a point when you got to go back home. A little bit like this Flights of Fancy, because the truth is you couldn't get rid of copyright without collapsing the creative industries. The one thing I have learned doing this channel and really talking about creativity and artistic worth and all these heavy things that we want to talk about is how actually this is directly indebted to commerciality and capitalism. Genius exists because genius makes people look. That's the truth. That's what artists do. Now, people look for all sorts of reasons, but the advertisers don't care. So let's just really get into how copyright would work. You're in a band, say, and in 1977 you went into a recording studio and you made a track. You jammed that out in the room. It was based upon another song you'd heard, but you changed a few chords and changed a few lyrics and nobody really noticed. When the album came out, you'd signed a deal and you had no awareness that this was actually going on, but the record company had also signed you to a publishing deal, and they divided up the rights to the song that you had made in this way. They had decided that whoever wrote the lyrics, which happened to be the singer, he made them up at the top on the spot at that time, is going to get 50% of the money. Right? So 50% of the copyright on a song is the lyrics. The other 50% is the music. Now, the band always split that all figure because they just wrote together. So there's 4 people in the band, right? So the bass player, the guitarist, the keyboardist, and the drummer are now getting 25% of 50%. So they're getting 12%. Let's just take that down to 10%, right? So they're getting 10%. The singer is getting 60%, right? They make this record. It does nothing. Makes them hardly any money. The album comes out, doesn't sell. They grow old, they end up becoming granddads, and they die. The singer has got no kids, right? But he is married. And so, years later, Guy Ritchie is making a film and he loves his old 70s music, and he discovers this song and he decides to bang this into the back of the key scene in the film, right? So this film is a huge hit. Now, every time that film is shown in a cinema, that cinema is making money because people have bought tickets to watch the film, and part of that, every ticket, a little tiny amount of that is now going to the copyright of this song. Right, there's also adverts on at the beginning of the cinema show, and some of the money that the advertisers paid is going to that song. When it's shown on the television has to pay to show the film, right? And that goes to them. Any ad revenue that is being made in that way goes to that song. That scene is so key that millions of YouTubers all over the place use that scene in memes and in all sorts of places. The music's there, and so that thing is now being shown millions of times. It's happening all over the place, right? And so they start to receive money for that song. And because people heard that song, it becomes a hit record. And because their label at some point dumped everything on Spotify, now people are checking it out on Spotify, and it's getting millions and millions, if not 1 billion listens, right? And that's making money. Suddenly, this is making money. But the lead singer, who has the vast majority of it, 60% of it, right? 60% of the profit of the record company, because most of it is going to the record company, you know. So let's just take YouTube. YouTube puts a video up, puts an advert on it. The advertiser pays for that video. 44% of the profit, the money for that ad, goes to the person who created the video. Their 56% is going to YouTube. All right. So that 44% goes to the person who's creating the video, right? But the record company's grabbed it, the publishing company's grabbed it 100%. So now that 40% is going directly to the people who made that song. But the record company gets it, and then they pass on, their publisher passes on about 15-20% of that 44% to the band, of which 60% is now passed on to the singer who has died. Who is benefiting from this? Well, obviously YouTube is, because they're getting the vast amount of it. Then the publishing company is getting more than the artist, because that's the cut. Then and nowadays you see people will make records themselves. They will own 100% of it. They will get very rich because of that. But making your record back in the 70s, you would have signed a deal, and many of those deals had clauses in them that did not include digital streaming and all that type of stuff. So the labels interpreted that as that they would have 100% of that, because it was never mentioned in the original contract. Nobody had signed that. And there's many bands out there with lawyers basically trying to get their streaming rights back, where the record companies now own them. So you end up with a situation, there's a vast amount of wealth being made. Some of it is going to YouTube or the Netflix, all these different companies that make their money. Remember what we've said here, either through adverts or subscription. That is the model now. That's what it, once you realise that's where the money comes, it's very simple to see it like that. Some of that is going to the publishing company, and then the vast amount that is going to the band is going to the lead singer, who is now dead. When he died, the rights to this, because he was a bit of a druggie, he died quite young, you see, and so it got passed on to his wife, right? And his wife then remarried, and then she died, and it got passed on to her kids. So now that wealth is being passed on to those kids, the children of someone who has actually got very little to do with this song, the profits from it, or the guy that wrote the lyrics. The drummer's still alive, and he's getting his 10%, and he's quite chuffed with that. He can just about eke out a living with that tiny 10%, along with his pension that he's lucky to have got, because he lives in the country with a state pension, you know, although that might not be there in the future. So basically, my point here is, if we were to get rid of copyright, we would fundamentally get rid of the mechanism by which musicians make money now. In the old days, if that had happened, they would have just been able to like go out on tour, sell tickets, and then sell their album. And one of the first things that happened with the advent of the internet and streaming was that bands started to make their own albums and start to release their own stuff, and people got very successful doing that. Progressive rock, which is one of the things we study here, in the 90s, a lot of people lost their labels, were then able to set their own labels up because they were able to grab their audience. In that Marillion were like that sort of Kickstarter model laid the groundworks for the sort of modern subscription model. We cannot get rid of copyright. It is massively unfair, but if you were to get rid of copyright, YouTube would not be able to make any money off their adverts, or they would totally make their money by completely ripping off artists. So that is where we are at with this video. I'm home. I'm definitely home. This is where it all started for me in terms of my YouTubing. I was in my garage during COVID. I was following my heart's desire. I was doing something that seemed like fun. It seemed like play. It didn't seem like work. I didn't know it would become work, but it has now become my job. As I'm filming this video, I'm stopping and starting, and I'm getting all sorts of text messages through, trying to organise interviews, trying to nail certain sessions, get things mastered. I've also got things going on in other areas with the family, business, all this type of stuff is going on at the same time. It feels like I'm at work, but when I stepped about 4 years ago into this room here in front of my records and I decided to rank them Avish North albums, I didn't know it would lead me here. That's the bizarre thing, is that we try to monetize play. That is what we're trying to do as creative artists. We're trying to monetize play, and that's a very hard thing to monetize. But it's essential, because without it, people will still play, but the financial incentive brings the best players to the table, because they're the ones whose play isn't just interesting to them, but it's interesting to more than just them, and it brings an audience to them. And that's a difficult thing to do, and that is what you try and monetize. Without that money, that stuff wouldn't happen. There would be a lot of creativity and a lot of art out there, but in the end it would be mundane. All right? The truth is while we still live in a society that's capitalistic and free, people will always find some way of being creative, and other people will shift through that, and they will be moved by some of the creative stuff that they see, and an audience will be created, and then the businessmen will come along and always monetize that audience. Because fundamentally what we're doing here is we're creating something that people look at. Sorry, I'll say that again. We're creating something that people look at, and in looking at it, the internet can now tell you what sort of person that is, and then they can make assumptions about what sort of thing that they would want to buy, and then put adverts next to that compulsive, interesting play that has manifested itself. So I can go for a walk. And why did I go for a walk this morning? It's because as I left to go to my studio, it was just such a beautiful day. And I thought, I've got to go to work and do some video, but I just want to get out in the sunshine, because I'm a bit stressed, and I knew a walk in the countryside and just to breathe the fresh air and see the blue skies and the fluffy clouds and the greenery would do me a lot of good. And that's why I did that. I thought, that'll be interesting. People will probably like to see that, because it's very pretty. Much nicer than my hovel where I started, which is literally just a garage. I tidied it up a little bit in the old days, but now you're back in there and people just bung bicycles in, and there's spiders about and all sorts of nastiness. You know, it's not so attractive as it was, but it's nice to be back here. It's nice to be home. That is what play is. You walk out your door and you have an experience, and you either can just have that experience, or you can have that experience and then try and react to it. That is the creative cycle described very fundamentally. On this video, I've basically done the fundamentally creative cycle. Leave your house, go out, blah, 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 come home, and I'm now back home. It's represented in music by the cadence. You go out, to a certain key or chord, and then you return back home. My point on here is, as much as we may find the capitalistic aspects of the music industry uncomfortable and immoral, and I've tried to really show how that could be. Also, I could have done a video on how bad Spotify is, how bad this is, how bad that is, and all that type of stuff. But I don't think that's a positive way to think if you're a creative person. I think you have to actually understand fundamentally what is going on and realise that without that, which is basically copyright, it's the ownership of your stuff, which is capitalism. It's seeing your creativity as capital. And so, obviously, I'm getting messages coming through. Real life is trying to impinge on me at the moment. And I'm talking onto my phone. And at the same time, text messages are appearing. You'll probably say, switch it off. But I have a family. I have worries, okay? My creativity is a way of getting that away from that for a while, but also weighing it and being able to use it to communicate something about what life is. So, the truth is, we cannot pick and choose which copyrights we get rid of, right? We cannot get rid of ad revenue because it would stop the actual platforms that allow creative people to make a living, unless you didn't want people to make a living. There is that thought out there as well, that creative people shouldn't make a living. But that sounds very sort of lefty and communistic to me. I don't like that. The truth is, and the very simple message I wanted to get across, the sort of practical message, is I think when it comes to copyright on the internet, the rule that should be brought in is it is a percentage of the time base of the product. That's what I believe. So in the same way, is when you make a series like Strange Things, I don't believe Kate Bush should be grabbing the whole series or even the whole episode. She should be getting a percentage of that money made by that in terms of time. And I think on YouTube, I would be quite happy to be able to put a song up, to be able to generate a small amount of income for the person who wrote that song, and to make that song available to people and help the artists out in that way. And that goes for old established artists, obscure artists from the past, but also new artists. But the only way we could have that on YouTube and on various other platforms is by, on an hour video, if somebody plays a song for 5 minutes, then they take a 12th, whatever that is of a percentage, they take a 12th of that, the revenue that's being made. I have really tried to up my work here and try and make my videos a bit more entertaining, put stuff in, funny bit stuff, but also put music in and all sorts of things. And I now face a month where I've been pretty much demonetized on a whole bunch of videos, and I'm going to have to get through that. And then go back to what I call proper YouTubing, which is a camera and you're talking to the camera and you try and do it with just the talk and don't have play all the tracks by all that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you watch my series on the guitarist that's come out recently, I'm really proud of them. And I did some more editing than I normally do. And they've got like loads of people playing the guitar. None of those all went to somewhere else. You know, all went to somewhere else. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't Derek Bailey. So we're at the end of this video. I'm back home. I'll sit back and I've got my records here. This is where it used to be, didn't it? With the records. Remember when I could do that and pull out a record like that? And then you could put in the comments, oh, it's a good album, that Automatic Man. The second one was okay, but that was the best one. You could say that about that. Or you could say, oh, Jeff Beck, one of his great fusion albums. It's not seen in the same way as Wired or Blow by Blow. I've got to get back in here. I need my vinyl up, don't I? The vinyl used to inspire me. That's what I've learnt from here. USA by King Crimson, brilliant. Purple Rock, one of the greatest albums ever made. It's all here. This is where it is. I've learnt something on this video. I've gone out into the world. I've gone and seen all the birds and the bees. I've seen the fluffy clouds, right? And I'm ending in the same way I've started. This is all making creative sense. It's not me. Like I'm low in the camera. Why am I low? Because I don't know. Right? I'm not the main subject of this. It's the environment. It's the subject of this one. And then I've got out and about. And then I've been driving in my car. And then I've come back home. And I've ended back up in here. And I've suddenly gone next to my vinyl and felt, not thought, but I felt the thing that creates this channel. It's this stuff here. Oh, I need to get some decent cases for this lot, and I need to transport it out. I need it up at my posh new studio. That's what's been missing. It's that thing of having, this is my life here, and when I just pull a record out that I've had for like 30, maybe 40 years, and I hold up and show you, that has memories for me, it has memories for you. We can hold it, we can touch it. This is what's so important, right? This is what's so important. Look, Jacko, Peter Erskine, Wayne Shorter, Joe Zawinul, they all look grumpy, but they shouldn't be grumpy because they made this album. It's a good album. Good album, that is. Really good. The best lineup of Weather Report? I think not. But it seems to be the case. This is what I'm missing. This is what I'm missing. Sometimes you have to go out your front door to realise things. That's the truth. That is what the real message of this one is for me. And for you, maybe you know what copyright's like, something you haven't thought about that much. And maybe you've come to the conclusion that I have, that they need to be a little bit fairer and not just have people through fate grabbing the vast majority. There needs to be some laws in there so where you can say, look, this video has made £1 million, but because, you know, I put some Vangelis on it, that they've all had that. Vangelis' cousin. I'm imagining all this. Vangelis is probably sat there. I don't know if he's alive or dead. Usually my encyclopedic knowledge knows these things, but for some reason that's like a black area. It's like the dead zone. I mean, now you all Googled it, or you know already. I feel like he's dead. You see, Vangelis, for me, is in. See, now I'm back here. This is all much more rambly and like my videos used to be. I've been missing this. Tell the story anyway. It's got nothing to do with the video. I have Vangelis, Demis Roussos, and Patrick Moraz. They're all in the same group for me. Patrick Moraz is still alive. Demis Roussos is definitely dead. In the middle, somewhere between Patrick Moraz and Demis Roussos, is Vangelis. He's in the middle. And so I feel like he's been afflicted by some of the health problems that maybe Vangelis was afflicted, which meant he didn't, you know, he didn't make a great old age, as Patrick Moraz is. So Vangelis could be alive or dead. I don't know. My feeling is he's dead. My feeling is he's dead. So a few years back, wasn't it? Oh, these people, they're just slipping into history, as we all are. Thanks for watching this video. Stick a like on it, stick a subscribe on it, because if you subscribe or you become a member of this channel or you become a member of Patreon, then I'm getting that money direct, you see, and that's the ideal. But if that happens too much, I will slip away from public view and die. So I need the people here that aren't going to close. So this time I'm going to say, don't like it, don't subscribe, don't do anything, just sit and watch the video. That's all you've had to do, because that's important too, and that is the moral of this one.